and welcome to the debate. I'm your host Sana Maqbool with you at PTV WORLD. In today's show, we will be talking about two stories. The first is with reference to what Pakistan has been doing to avert the humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan. Pakistan has always been talking about the suffering and the plight of the people in Afghanistan who are faced with a huge humanitarian and economic crisis at the moment. In reference to this, Pakistan had extended all possible efforts and help to help with the situation that is going on currently in Afghanistan. And in this reference, it has allowed India to send wheat to Afghanistan to help the people in the country. For this, facilitation has been provided by Pakistan through the Wagah border. The trucks from Afghanistan will be coming in and they will be going back into the city carrying tons of wheat from India. This, of course, is in line with what Pakistan has been talking about in terms of helping the people of Afghanistan, despite the kind of responses, actions and statements that we keep getting in from the Indian side as well. And of course, since we have also seen how India has reacted in terms of the measures taken against the people of Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, particularly after 2019, which is why trade relations between Pakistan and India have also suffered greatly, have been stopped, because the measures taken by India call for such measures to be taken by Pakistan as well. However, with regards to the kind of humanitarian issue that currently exists in Afghanistan, Pakistan has extended all possible support despite these issues. We're going to talk more about how important this step has been and what more can be done for the people of Afghanistan, particularly also after the announcement of Joe Biden as well, in terms of unfreezing half of the $7 billion in aid to Afghanistan, and half of them to be possibly used by the victims of the 9/11 terrorist attacks, which is something that we'll talk in further detail in the show as well. We'll also be, in our second segment of the show, taking a look at what is going on in India with regards to the hijab ban and the controversy that has now spread to Uttar Pradesh as well. This is something that has gained momentum, particularly after a viral video in which a girl student was being harassed by a mob of Hindus who were chanting slogans and making life difficult for the woman. We've also seen since then a couple of brave students have raised issues with regards to wearing hijab and being able to practice their religion freely, something which of course is in the courts now, and the decision has been pending. We're going to see what really is a progress with regards to that at the moment, whether or not we can see any hopeful decisions coming in from the court, and then of course the way that this is going to seep into UP, and particularly the election campaign being used by the BJP, and whether or not these issues are going to factor in the way that we're going to see the election campaign develop in the future. For this and more, we have in the studios with me Farrukh, Pitafi and Raja Faisal. As always, thank you for being with us in the studio. And online, we will also be joined by respective guests. But before that, let's take a look at a particular clip from an interview that Prime Minister Imran Khan has given at CNN's Fareed Zakaria GPS, in which he's spoken about and reiterated the kind of situation that exists in Afghanistan and the efforts it calls for.
People in the US must understand one thing. Disliking Taliban government is one thing, but it's a question of 40 million, almost 40 million Afghans. Half of them are in a very precarious situation. So there's hunger, there's Afghan winters is extremely wicked, ruthless. And so they're facing winter, the food shortages, malnutrition. The next couple of months, everyone is worried that they could be one of the worst, or already developing into one of the worst humanitarian crises.
Well, you heard what Prime Minister Imran Khan has said, and of course we all realize that this is something which calls for immense efforts from the international community, and hopefully more countries will also follow suit in terms of what needs to be done to help the people of Afghanistan. I'll welcome in the debate the expert online as soon as he joins us, but before that, let's talk about what, of course, the recent measures, particularly the one taken by Pakistan, the kind of significance that it holds for the people in Afghanistan. Faisal, this is something that that Pakistan had spoken about 3 months ago and has said that it will allow India to help provide aid to Afghanistan. And this, of course, is despite all the issues that prevails there. Something perhaps that would not have been extended to us maybe in such a situation, because a lot of these courtesy calls previously have not been given by India.
Sana, you're very right about it, and a very important issue that I want to highlight here is that this shows the commitment of Pakistan to help people of Afghanistan. We know that Pakistan is not having a good bilateral relation with India, and looking at the current situation, India has been obviously using in past Afghanistan to penetrate terrorism in Pakistan, and now when Afghanistan is facing a humanitarian crisis, Pakistan is going to an extent where it is allowing its eastern neighbor a rival, nuclear rival, and allowing it to send the humanitarian aid, much needed one, to Afghanistan. And I think it's a message for the whole world as well, that Pakistan can go to any extent to help people of Afghanistan as they are direly in the need. And the biggest reason behind it is that we have experienced it for years and years. I mean, last 4 decades we have seen that people of Afghanistan, whenever they had turbulence within their own country, there were a huge a chunk of the population was getting inside to Pakistan as refugees, and Pakistan has been catering them for decades. And I think that was the only solution to the humanitarian crisis. But to me, I think this is the right time that the world, which is especially the Western world, we know that they have some demands they ask from Taliban. I think this is the time that they need to reassess and rejudge all of them demands. In recent times, Taliban, they have been working on them, like women education, women empowerment. If we talk about the inclusiveness of the government, I met somebody yesterday from United Nations who is based in Kabul. He was in Islamabad, and it was a good meeting with him. And I asked him, and he said to me that if we deeply look into the current setup of the Taliban regime, there are so many people who hail from Hazara community, who ethnically they are Tajiks, they are Uzbeks, and they are part of Taliban, and they are actually working within the setup and within the system. So to me, I think if the Western world deeply looks into it, there are improvements that can be made, and the only possible way is to sit with the Taliban and make something that is acceptable to the whole world.
Let me also welcome in the debate Mr. Tariq Farhadi, who's an Afghan affairs expert. He has joined us online. Thank you very much, Mr. Farhadi, for being with us. I was told that you will be joining us at 9:20 and only for 10 minutes, so I'm glad that you joined us a little earlier than that, and we'll make the most of your time. With what is happening on in Afghanistan, an important measure has been taken by Pakistan, allowing aid to flow in from India as well. Of course, we have our issues with the country, but despite that, the humanitarian concerns that we have for the people of Afghanistan is what is more important. But do you think that this measure is being looked at by countries from around the world in a way that the situation that Pakistan is currently in and the way that has emphasized calls for humanitarian issues to be addressed in Afghanistan is being taken into account, is being given due importance, is being appreciated on that level?
Yes, I mean, we the Afghans appreciate because the 50,000 tons of wheat can finally travel from Wagah and arrive in Afghanistan. Prime Minister of Pakistan has said that when he arrived, he tried to break the ice with India, but on the other side, the mood in general was not to break the ice. But in an ideal situation, we would like all these countries to be able to trade together, even if there is not a lot of diplomatic relationship. Trade between the 3 countries of South Asia makes sense. We have dried fruits to export to India. The easiest way to export it is through Pakistan. Turkmenistan has natural gas. You have heard of the TAPI project. Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India. India will be a beneficiary. So, yes, the problem is on the India side at this point that they have not really answered to the calls of the countries to make the trade relationship a regional relationship as it should be. Of course, the Indians might say that on the Pakistani side there are problems as well, but I think from what we have observed, basically, it makes a lot of sense for an economic relationship to burgeon between the countries of South Asia. All the citizens of all these countries concerned would benefit.
And absolutely, the economic relations with India are, of course, important, but of course, it also dependent on the fact that the kind of measures that have been taken place, particularly back in 2019, need to be reversed. Don't you think that that is something that needs to be done before we can talk about this?
Concurrently, it can be done, but I think the Prime Minister of Pakistan, in his interview with Farid Zakaria, CNN, explained this very well. He said, when I arrived, I made the overtures to India, but basically in India, now let's look at it from the Indian standpoint. They, for their internal political reasons, they have to have a tough line on. There's some religious separations that they are trying to create. We have seen the latest images in India of what happens to a woman who comes out with a hijab to the university, etc. It's unfortunate. But their internal political situation with Prime Minister Modi, the way he came to power and with the narrative that he came to power, it keeps him in this logic that it has to be this way, but it can be a different way.
Right.
Of course,
Tariq Farhadi Sahab, I'm going to take you away from India, Pakistan, and to the US. The recent decision by the US government or administration to actually split Afghan funds and actually release half of that for the upkeep of the Afghan people. I understand the outrage. I have seen commentary coming from our Afghan friends. Let me ask you about the monies that are going to be released for the uplift of Afghan people. Do you think it will have any impact at all, sir?
So the monies that could be given to the UN will not be spent transparently. The UN does not consult Afghans on how to spend any money, and the UN expenditure system is not transparent, unfortunately. They are not giving an account to anybody. The UN likes to audit itself by the UN. It has never submitted to an audit, outside audit, and that's what Elon Musk was saying to the WFP when the WFP chief called for money for the food program. Elon Musk said, just give us a financial statement how you will spend it. So this money belongs to Afghanistan. We are not minors, we are not saghirs, you see, for another entity called the UN to spend our own money on ourselves.
Right. Sir, just to clarify, I want to understand what is your biggest concern, whether it will be actually consumed by corrupt means, or whether a lot of this money will fall through the cracks, because in bureaucracy that is also a concern, right? So, and then my question again is this volume, this amount of money, how much can it take care of Afghan crisis right now? I understand that these are reserves which were supposed to actually go to shore up the currency reserves and eventually the banking system. But now it will be spent on food and other things, medicines, shelter and such like things, right? So explain to me what are your basic concerns and whether this money will be wasted eventually.
Dear Farrukh, the UN has the capacity to spend $3.5 billion. We will only get a few bags of rice and wheat, and the rest of it will be spent in UN aircraft, land cruisers, Nepali guards to guard their offices, and salaries for photographs that they bring from the West in order to make 2 photos for UNHCR. So, and those are very high salaries. The UN system, unfortunately, is what it is, but this money will be used in UN, in high-cost UN expenditure system, and very little of it will arrive to the needy people of Afghanistan. And this is our own money. Why
Right.
should the UN spend it in this way?
Right, and Mr. Farhadi, with reference to half of the frozen assets expected to be given to the victims of 9/11 terrorist attacks, this decision, of course, has also been criticized and condemned by the Afghan authorities. How do you see this particular decision with reference to this money, which, like you said, is the money of the Afghan people being given to families that are victims of 9/11 attacks?
Yes, I can
And
explain
is
this in
it,
2 minutes.
sorry to cut you, but is it what you call reparations?
No, what has happened is that a number of women had won a lawsuit in 2010, and they have named the Taliban. And now there was no money, so it was a non-issue. And now there is money, so the lawyers have gone and said, oh, the Taliban are in the central bank, and we can take their money. So here the solution is, and I have just come off an interview on Afghan TV where I proposed to the Taliban to take Taliban away from central bank. If we take Taliban away from central bank, then we put a counter lawsuit in the United States. We say this money belongs to the central bank. There is no Taliban in the central bank. This money belongs to the central bank. There is no Taliban in the central bank. So the title of the lawsuit, which was getting back money from the Taliban, is not valid anymore because this is a central bank money and there is no Taliban in the central bank. So we are putting pressure on the Taliban basically to look, take the Taliban away from the central bank. A central bank should be an independent monetary entity. And this is the whole problem, is that when the United States is saying we cannot give this money to the central bank because it goes to the Taliban. So we have
Right,
to take
Mr.
the
Farhadi, I understand that. That seems to be a way to go around this decision. But irrespective of that, is there any legal concerns? What is the legality of this decision to have these assets being frozen from Afghanistan and then giving them to the victims of terrorist attack families?
And just to actually further build on this question, the recommendations that you are giving right now regarding reforms in the Central Bank of Afghanistan, don't you think that it is now a concern after the fact because a decision in principle has been taken, money will start moving?
Right.
So the decision has been taken, but these things take years. Actually, the lawsuits by these ladies, the women of 9/11 in the United States, has been going on. These files can take years. And in fact, what the decision has been taken is to protect it right now in a special account. The decision has not been taken by the President of the United States to give all this money to those lawsuits. It's to protect it until such lawsuits are finished. But basically, what we need to do is a counter lawsuit to say there is no Taliban in the central bank, and this is reserves of a sovereign country, so you cannot really use reserves of a sovereign country of a central bank where there is no Taliban to give it to a lawsuit which is named after Taliban. So this is the conversation we're having with Kabul, basically, is you have to sort of wise up and make this arrangement, because for a poor country like Afghanistan, even if we take back 2 billion from the 7 billion that comes to our own authority, it's better than the situation where...
Regardless, I think the fundamental premise is still not being challenged of this possible decision.
And this is what he's saying, that you actually go to the court. But sir, very quickly, why only Afghanistan? Taliban didn't attack America, right? It was Osama bin Laden, who was a Yemeni citizen, and then there were other countries whose people actually attacked on 9/11. Why is Afghanistan being asked to pay for it?
Well, you know, Farrukh, it is the lawyers, the legal system in the United States is private. The lawyers who approach the courts take judgments for their benefit, for their clients' benefits, and then where there is a deep pocket and money, they go after it. So it was as simple as that. And to dismantle that, it will take a lot of effort. But we have to have a strategy that's based not on feelings, but a legal strategy, and the legal strategy which I just proposed here.
Yeah, Mr. Farhadi, if we look into the current GPS interview of Prime Minister of Pakistan Imran Khan, Prime Minister of Pakistan, he categorically highlighted that if we talk about any alternate power within Afghanistan that could replace Taliban, it is out of the question. There is no one who can actually replace the Taliban of Afghanistan, and they are the only power that can actually rule Afghanistan in coming future. So if this is the situation, why can't the Western countries, they can sit down and talk with them, because previously they sat down and talked with them as well to negotiate peace. Why not now? They can sit down with them and they can look at the progress they have made in recent 5-6 months, and they can assess over it that yes, they are making a progress. And if we look at the previous Taliban regime and this one, there is a significant sort of difference between both of them. And yes, these are the Taliban 2.0, and they should be considered as the different Taliban, a new Taliban who know how the world works and they want to work with the world. And if we look at the current stance of the Western powers, don't you think that they have this stance just for one reason, that they want to show the world that Taliban will be a failure and Afghanistan would remain a turbulent land rather than it seeing some kind of peace, non-negotiable peace for the future?
So here is the situation. Why do we need the Taliban in Afghanistan now? Is that the Taliban have announced an amnesty in Afghanistan. This amnesty is not perfect, but after so many years of war, this amnesty has worked relatively. It has worked relatively. There has been infractions to the amnesty, but this amnesty has worked, and we need the Taliban to be here and continue this amnesty. Because after so much violence in Afghanistan, there's a lot of settlements of scores. But in fact, because of this amnesty, we have one of the moments in the last 6 months where there has been less violence in Afghanistan over several decades. So this is the benefit of having the Taliban now, and we implore the Taliban every day on our interviews and contacts, please talk about the amnesty. Please talk about the amnesty, because this is very important to keep the violence level at near zero. That is one point why we need the Taliban.
And
very quickly,
one should actually compliment you for actually coming up with this idea of going to the courts in the US, because I see a coherent game plan here. On one side, you actually removed Afghan Taliban from the state bank, or central bank for that matter, the Afghan bank, and on the other, then you take the plea and tell the courts in the US that this is actually a country you're talking about, not the Afghan Taliban, ergo shouldn't be disturbed, and this money should come back to the people.
Yeah. Mr. Farhadi, wouldn't it be a good counter to the Americans if Taliban can announce that we need that money back just because we want to utilize it for the people, for the victims who laid their lives, who they were victimized with their limbs and all, the injured ones. And wouldn't it be a good step by Taliban to announce that they want to use that money which is stuck in America for them victims of war which was imposed on Afghanistan?
More hot-headedness. Yeah.
So you see, what the Taliban say is not heard in the United States. It's finished. So what we need to do is to take very level-headed approach here and make the central bank a non-Taliban entity, and the central bank puts a lawsuit in and says, look, it was the central bank's money. There is no Taliban here, so how come you are taking the central bank's money? There is no Taliban. So the title of the lawsuit of the ladies who were saying we're going after Taliban, no, this is a central bank fund, you see? So that's one thing. The second thing is, and also we're having this negotiation with Taliban. I met them in Geneva. There was a delegation here. That they have to change. They have to change. On a lot of fronts, there has to be reform on what the Taliban have to do. I think their leaders listen. It takes time for them to change. It's difficult. It's not easy. But at least I felt when I met the Taliban in Geneva, their delegation was here, that they're open to listening.
Mr. Farhadi, my last question to you, since it's time for you to leave, with reference to what we have spoken about as a possible legal route to take that the Taliban can possibly take, is this also something which is probable, something that the Taliban can consider and will pursue?
We have said it to the Taliban. They have to come to this conclusion that either we lose everything, half of it to the 9/11 widows, and it's a legal system in the United States. You have to come with a legal strategy, and half of it to the UN, which will spend it on expenditures and will throw a few bags on us. So this is a decision for the Taliban to see if they want to adopt a strategy where the maximum of this money can come back to Afghanistan. But we cannot do this fight if the Taliban are not helping us.
Right. Thank you so much, Tariq
you very much.
Farhadi, for being with us and taking the time out to be part of the debate today. An interesting way to move around with things, with, of course, what is happening in the US courts. Farrukh, is this something that you can see as the only option for the Taliban regime that Mr. Farhadi was saying? Because otherwise, they're only suffering.
Actually, I would agree with Tariq Farhadi Sahab that this is not a strategy for Afghan Taliban, it is a strategy for Afghanistan, right? It is Afghanistan's money, it is sovereign funds of a country, and they belong to the people of that country, not to one political group, whether it is in power or not.
Right.
So the entire strategy essentially revolves around this. I don't think there is any other antidote, and that's why I complimented him. But earlier, I was listening to my friend Faisal here, and he keeps on talking about Taliban 2.0. You can call them Taliban 9.0. It doesn't go from my pocket, whatever you want to. But to me, I don't know whether he has been around that long. But I remember 1990s when Taliban actually took over. So to me, just to actually paraphrase what was a Punjabi saying, Santa Singh and Banta Singh, one and same thing, right? You can keep on adding these various aspects, numbers adding. But the fact is that you haven't actually shown the resolve or the kind of reform that was needed. And I actually am getting tired of this argument on two sides. One, it brings a lot of burden on me as a citizen of this country that I'm fighting a case for another country, right?
Right.
And then I have perfectly good relations with those countries that I'm arguing with, right? So earlier you played a clip of Prime Minister of Pakistan, and as a citizen I'm a jealous man, right? I want my Prime Minister to always keep on fighting for my rights. And the problem is for past 6-7 months, what is happening is the entire state of Pakistan has to talk to the West, talk to other countries about Afghanistan, right?
Yeah.
So my concern at this moment is, and honestly, I hope it doesn't become my image of the entire South Asia. I'm a South Asian. But I started believing that Murphy's Law, that which can go wrong, will always go wrong, has become a force of history in South Asia. I don't want to believe this. But sadly it is happening, and I'm being convinced by these things.
Yeah,
Faisal, do you really think that the Taliban are not all that same or all the same as Farrukh is talking about? Is there no difference between what they used to be?
Yes, Sana, there are two reasons I always, I'm very optimistic about it. That today's Taliban, they are different Taliban. As Farrukh has earlier mentioned, that previous Taliban, of course, we always kept on hearing that, they had problems. I mean, at that time, I still remember one of the journalists I came across in 2001. He said to me that he's been to Afghanistan and he was obviously clean shaven. And when he came back, he had a long beard, and he said he was imprisoned there, and he wasn't let go until his beard was grown. That's the previous Taliban I'm talking about. But today's Taliban are entirely different. And yesterday I met with somebody from United Nations who works in there, and he said to me that life is as normal as it used to be previously, and there is a sense of security within Kabul, and that is very changed Kabul now in that sense that it is more secure. But if we look at why Prime Minister of Pakistan and why I we keep on stay positive about Taliban. The only reason is when you're playing a game of cards, you can only play with the given cards.
Right.
And the given cards are that you have Taliban and there is no one to replace them. And I think in this situation, you have to play with the given cards.
Yeah, but
play safe.
I'm not complaining, by the way. I understand your next guest has joined us, and most welcome to her. But very quickly, I'm not actually saying that what is happening is wrong. I'm saying I'm a jealous man, and I feel that attention that belonged to me is being given to somebody else.
But
and I want to take it back.
Again, that is
Farrukh,
what's happening, and
alternately-
it's going to impact us, so we have to take care of that. as well.
Ultimately, that concern is for you. That's why Prime Minister
Exactly.
is,
Let's just move on to Shani.
There's a book called Unbearable Lightness of Being. I'm feeling that right now.
All right, Shani Hamid, thank you very much for joining us. She's a human rights activist, as you can see on the screen. She's joined us on the debate online. Thank you very much for being a part of the show. With regards to what is happening in India, and of course the hijab ban and the kind of controversy that has spread now to UP as well, and the way that this issue is being handled in the courts in India is something that we want to be able to discuss in our show today. But before moving on to what's happening in the aftermath of this issue being taken in the courts, let's talk about the issue at hand. What really is the problem over here? Why is everybody so obsessed with what women wear?
I think we have some.
Unfortunately, I think there's a technical issue that we're facing.
There seems to be saturation in connection.
Hopefully, Shani will be joining us back soon. But with reference to what is going on in India, of course, it's a problem on so many levels. It is not just an issue of practicing religious freedom. It's also an issue of being able to choose what you want to do. And the way the things that are developing in the courts at the moment, the situation does not seem very hopeful. Shani, can you hear me?
Yes, now I can. Yes, thank you.
All
so
right,
much.
go
It
ahead,
was just
please.
a short interruption. Thank you. Now I can. Yes. Well, I would like to remind you a few simple articles that have been accepted by the world leaders, by everybody in the world. So it goes as this. So forgive me for quoting this from my notes. The right to adequate clothing or the right to clothing is recognized as human right in various international human rights agencies under the Article 11 of the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. Plus, the right to clothing is being recognized under Article 25 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and India is signatory of these rights and articles, and including Geneva Convention, Genocide Convention. So what's happening? Just put it bluntly, it is a pure Islamophobia, it's a pure genocide action is happening in the country. One majority leading group is taking the law in their hand, and they are just keep hurting not only the Muslims, but Muslims at this point, because Muslims are very strong and powerful in the region, than the other minorities. So this is going to go to the other minorities as well. So there is a genocide happening. So why we know and how we know that it's a genocide? Because let's just think about what is a genocide. Genocide is about peoples being classified and being separated and being given names and being stigmatized and symbolized and discriminated and by some dominant groups and by these dominant groups using the law. So why this is happening? Of course, there is a powerful group in that particular country and taking the law in the hand and knows that how to play with the law, and what
Right.
the world can
Jenny,
do is
Jenny,
up to us. Yes.
I appreciate that you always outline the kind of laws that exist with regards to any issue that we discuss, and the kind of accepted definitions that are there, and through which we can see the kind of violations that are happening in India. But despite that, it seems that because these laws are being violated and not really cared about, and are done so without consequence, it doesn't matter really what the law says at the moment, because what is going on in India is in spite of that. So even though there are laws that exist, we see that something is happening, a situation which is beyond that. So don't you think that our reaction perhaps needs to be something that matches that as well?
You're absolutely right, and I'm with you 100%. So, where we come, law shouldn't be for somebody else's luxury. Law shouldn't work for the powerful person or the group. Law is for everybody. So, since we are talking about law, I'm going to call the reliable media to take this matter in hand. And reliable media has a big power to remind everybody that law is for everyone, law is for people. And who are the citizens? Whether not, doesn't matter they are politicians or the normal, ordinary citizens somewhere else. Law is for everyone. So where we have to come together and bring and show everyone that we have the power of people to
Right.
remind
All right,
everyone that there
Farrukh,
is a
you've
law.
been following what is happening
Yeah.
in Karnataka courts very
Yeah.
closely as well, and you've seen the kind of discussions that have taken place and the way things are moving forward. Even the interim order was not something that is, of course, pointing us in a positive light. With reference to what issues that are being discussed, don't you think that the overall issue that is at hand is being dissected into a million pieces which don't really matter at the moment, and perhaps the real issue is being ignored?
Right. First of all, let me remind everybody who's watching what is it about, right? On one side, it is about colonization of minds of people, subjugating them, right? Especially the minorities. But on the other side, it is also about something that extends from Kabul to Karnataka, and that is female bodies, that all conservatives all over the world, from Texas to Kabul to this place, Karnataka, or everywhere else, somehow believe that they have to control or police a woman's body. I don't understand why. Right? Throughout my life, nobody told me how to dress. I learned how to dress on my own. I managed to control my body. I don't want to believe. I don't believe in any kind of vulgarity anywhere. But honestly, why is it so hard for people, especially men who dominate conservative movements, to convince themselves that an individual is an individual? Whatever they want to wear is their right, right? This is very important to remember. Now, the question about what is happening in India, you are right absolutely about the Karnataka High Court, because they are afraid. There's so much systemic pressure in the country that, remember, all judges have families, right? The moment you come out after giving a very courageous judgment, somebody can kill you. Somebody can kill your family.
So there's no real justice in India.
Everyone has surrendered. And this is what I keep on saying. Let me quote Allama Iqbal here. वाय नाकामी मताए कारवां जाता रहा, कारवां के दिल से एहसास ज़ह जाता रहा, right? What a tragedy that the caravan lost all its belongings. But it is not that big a tragedy, because the caravan also lost the sense of loss. This is what is happening in India. Today, Javed Naqvi Saab wrote a beautiful column for Dawn, and he also resonated what was said by Arundhati Roy yesterday, that fascism is almost over in India. I'm not going to believe that till the time I see evidence. Why? Because everywhere there's this nexus between these two elements, the rich billionaires and the conservative clergy, that control human minds so that only rich become richer and the poor remain poorer. And that's why, because of this consensus, they find a way across every defeat. Even if Barack Obama wins in an election, 20 years later, 15 years later, you feel pain because Trump is there.
Right.
then.
Right.
So I don't think that anything is going to change, and India is
let me
going
just
to
quickly go to Shani. I'll
have
come
no
back
hope.
to you, Faisal. Shani, this is something we've discussed in our show yesterday as well, whether or not there is hope for India and whether or not we can see some rays simmering in with change that can be brought about in the way that the fascist ideology is spreading in the country. Do you see any evidence of that, any examples that perhaps we can look towards to see that things can change for the better?
Yes, I do. You know, the power of media. Now, I would like to ask for the power of reliable media, and I would like to ask for the power of people to come together. We are still having a little bit of difficulty to come under one umbrella, to just to have one joint action plan. We need to have the media, the NGOs, the power of people, the reliable, non-corrupted politicians and leaders of the organizations together in order to achieve what we are looking for, the prosperity for the human being. For human
Absolutely.
rights.
That
Cannot do
is.
this. We will continue going around and around. So,
Shani, I understand that, of course, is very, very important. Faisal, I understand you have a question for Shani, but before that, could you also answer the fact that when we see the same issue being discussed in UP as well now, and we have also seen that in the past, any rift between Hindu and Muslim communities is used in election campaigns throughout. Is this something that's going to seep into the election that we see taking place in UP as well?
Certainly, you know, in very soon there will be an election, and we know that in recent times lots of things were happening in there. One of them is Eidgah Mosque, which got vandalized, which Hindutva ideology culprits, they have been protesting against it, and they want to remove it because they believe that Krishna Janmabhoomi existed there, and they want to build that one there. I just wanted to highlight a point. For nearly 1,000 years Muslims ruled over India, in patches or overall or whatever, but there was not a single instant where they said or they did something to convert Hindus, or to at a larger level to tell them to shun their practices. Nobody changed their dress ups, nobody changed their how they live, living styles or anything like that. And if there are Muslims seen in this region, Indo-Pak region, I mean, I always give my own example. I hail from a sort of family. Before 17th century, we were Hindus as well, and we were attracted by the Sufism. Sufism was considered as a very secular Islam in them days, and predominantly, if we look at India, I mean, Sufism was the main Islam which was being followed in past. And to me, I think the Muslims rulers, they were more secular than today's India. The Hindutva ideology is there to change everything. And I think now I want to take you to the Europe. I think a problem started since 2011. Countries like France, who always stand for human rights and everything, how they can stand against today's India, knowing the fact that they were the very first one in Europe to ban the hijab and ban the burqa. And this is where the problem lies. If you ask Hindutva ideology people, and if you confront them on social media, they would straight away say that if countries like France are doing it, why people are stopping us to do that? And if I think the European countries, they could lead in that, and they were in a position to talk with India. But if obviously India won't listen to these things, because today predominantly we have an ideology which is a Hindutva ideology, and they are thinking about having a Mahabharat. In that, of course, nobody can talk to them. But the only thing which I see as a positive coming out of the West is, while they were having farmers' protests in India, people like, or singers like Rihanna, who had an influence, global influence, they used that influence and they condemned it. And today we have people like Paul Pogba, footballer of Manchester United. he came forward and he actually highlighted it, and he went against these sort of laws. So I think right now, if the governments aren't doing anything, then these sort of personalities, they need to come and the precedent which was set by Rayhana
Right.
previously,
Right, and,
they need
and
to follow
I
that.
will have to
Yes.
go back to your original question, Sana. It was too juicy a question to actually ignore, and that was about UP election, right? At this moment, regarding the way data is coming out, you cannot trust anything, right? Because there are so many channels cannot be relied upon regarding information. Then the pollsters again or psephologists are very circumspect. But the numbers or data that we are hearing, and that's why I brought up Javed Naqvi Saab. Javed Naqvi Saab said that this entire debate about hijab was essentially a souffle that they wanted to employ in UP, Uttarakhand,
Right.
and Goa, and the souffle refused to actually rise. So at this moment, it is not having the kind of traction or impact, and eventually the numbers so far what we are hearing is that in UP, at least in the first two phases, the second one essentially was SP's stronghold, the main challenger to BJP. But the frank truth is that at this moment, so far, what we are hearing, BJP is losing. But will it lose? And then it will lose in 2024? We don't know, because these guys have perfected the art of actually taking every loss and transforming it into a victory later on. But at this moment, regarding how it is,
Right.
I'm finishing up. How it is.
No, I was just-
At this moment, Goa is an example. There is a huge Christian, presence there, and I must say hats off to them. They have actually, weaponized their identity against BJP, and they are going to punish BJP in Goa. So
No,
that is
I
a
was
good
just saying
news.
that perhaps this is the kind of hope that we were talking about, no? Doesn't that give you hope?
Yeah, this is what I'm
Perfect.
saying. I mean, I'm not a billionaire, right? A person who is 70 billion rich, and he is actually using all the money to help these guys, can get away with a
Sure.
lot of murder.
Absolutely, absolutely. Shani, what we were earlier talking about, of course, we've seen the way that international institutions, countries, and laws work in terms of any consequence for the actions that are being taken by the Indian government. But with what reference to what Faisal was saying, that we have people or influencers making calls that perhaps have an impact or can create ripples of change. Do you think that this is something that is moving things forward in India in a more positive direction? And how much of an impact is it really having? And also, with regards to what we see happening on ground in India, do you see that this is something that can perhaps be taken up with the way that things are going within India as well? For example, voices like Roy or others who have an impact can perhaps mobilize the people in a way that it does have an impact.
It is just two separate issues. First of all, if it and you have to excuse me because I could not hear few words, so do accept my apologies. So
Sure.
there are two different issues. If a country is coming with a constitution and saying that there are some bans that no religious symbolic outfit will be used in public areas, in schools, in government offices. That includes Muslims or any other representations of the religions. And we can just consider this as a different issue of that country's particular institutional matter. But if it comes to if we are banning just the Muslims from wearing a hijab, that we can go straight away to ICC and say that, okay, yes, we are facing a human rights abuse, and this is a clear human rights abuse, and we can just go ahead and work on
All
this.
right.
So
All
there
right.
is a hope. There is a hope. As you said, if media and NGOs and the world leaders, if they come together and if they just take this responsibility to eliminate.
Right. Shani, we're almost out of time. My last question to you with reference to what is happening in India. Of course, what you wear is also part of your identity. But the sense of identity is also within. How much is this actually going to impact the way that people look at themselves or identify themselves and the resolve that they have in terms of practicing whatever they believe?
Well, everybody has to keep continue, and they have to be an individual. They have to do what they believe is right, and they have to respect the humanitarian law, the base law, not some dictator's law. And
all right.
If they
all right. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for. Shani Hamid, thank you so much for joining us in part of the debate. There is, of course, so much more that there is to discuss, but because shortage of time, we will not be able to do that. At the end of the day, what really matters is, of course, to be able to allow people to be free in terms of their choices, something that is very important for people all around the world. And that we really want to see in India as well. But again, there are a lot of shoulds, and what really is going to happen in India is what is going to make a difference. And we hope that is something more aligned with what should be happening. Thank you for watching the debate, and we'll see you tomorrow at 9.